I've made my decision. I'll marry the Hamilton ghost. Scarlett Vance leaned against the grand doorframe of her family's estate, a mocking smile playing on her perfect red lips. Her father, Julian Vance, nearly dropped his cigar on the priceless Persian rug. He shot up from his leather armchair, the wrinkles around his eyes smoothing in disbelief. Scarlett, you mean it? That's wonderful. The Hamilton family has been pressing us. The wedding is in 2 weeks, in Havenwood. What style of gown do you want? I'll have it ordered immediately. And that's it. Scarlett's laugh was cold. I take your precious illegitimate daughter's place, and I get nothing in return. The temperature in the room plunged. Julian's face darkened. How dare you? She's not illegitimate. She's your sister. A sister shares a mother, she said, her voice light but her eyes like chips of ice. She is the product of your affair. I will never acknowledge her. A vein throbbed in Julian's temple, but he visibly swallowed his rage. He took a deep breath, ash from his cigar crumbling to the floor. What do you want? $10 billion, she said, her lips barely moving. And once I'm married, you will assign Kian Mercer to protect your darling little bastard. Julian's expression froze. He stared at her as if she were insane. Are you crazy? $10 billion will drain every cent of my liquid assets. And Kian, he's your favorite bodyguard. You used to joke about marrying him. You're getting married and you're not taking him with you. Is it a deal or not? Scarlett's patience frayed. She turned to leave. Fine. Julian slammed his hand on the desk. The day you leave for Havenwood. It's done. He didn't care about her reasons. He just wanted to lock this down. Years ago, when Arthur Hamilton was the city's golden beau, Julian had arranged this engagement for his younger daughter, Bella. But a tragic accident had left the Hamilton heir in a coma, a ghost in a bed. He couldn't bear to let Bella suffer. That's when he remembered he had another daughter. Scarlett waved a dismissive hand over her shoulder, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a slap to the face. As she gripped the doorknob, her father's voice stopped her. I can understand the money, Scarlett. But Kian, you adore him. Why would you give him to Bella? Her fingers tightened on the cold metal. She didn't turn back, but a sudden, searing heat flooded her eyes. That name was a splinter. Digging deep into the softest part of her heart, she shoved the door open, shutting her father and his question behind her. It was late when she returned to her private villa. As she walked up the stairs, she heard a muffled sound from Kian's room. The door was ajar. She glanced inside, and the scene that unfolded before her was brutally clear. Kian was leaning against the headboard, his long, lean fingers holding a photograph. His eyes were closed, his throat working as a low, husky sound escaped his lips. Bella, baby. So good. It was a photo of Isabella Vance, taken at her birthday party last year. She was wearing a white dress, her smile the very picture of innocence. Scarlett's nails dug into the leather strap of her Hermes bag, carving deep crescent moons. In the silence of her mind, she finally answered her father's question. Because he's just like you. He only loves Bella. The truth was a fire, burning through her insides. She'd met Kian Mercer 3 years ago. Among a lineup of burly bodyguards, her eyes had locked on him instantly. The reason was simple. He was impossibly handsome. 6'2", broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and sharp features. His dark eyes were as cold as ice. Scarlett, the resident siren of her social circle, had intended to make him her latest game. But 3 years of trying had yielded nothing. She'd accidentally stumbled into his arms, only for him to lift her by the scruff of her neck like a kitten and place her back on the sofa. She'd knocked on his door at midnight in a silk slip, only for him to wrap her in his suit jacket and escort her respectfully back to her room. She'd even faked drowning in the pool. He'd saved her without his hands ever touching her waist. No matter how she teased, he remained a perfect gentleman, always calling her Miss Vance. Yet, somewhere along the way, her game had turned real. She had fallen for him. She couldn't pinpoint the moment it happened. Maybe it was because after her mother's death, she had been so utterly alone. Her father's affair came to light when she was 7, bringing with it a daughter only 3 months younger than her. Her mother, 9 months pregnant and days from giving birth, had confronted him. The grief and betrayal sent her into premature labor. She died in the hospital, taking the baby with her, a 2-for-1 tragedy. From that day on, Scarlett hated her father and she hated Bella. She moved out, grew up alone, and only sought a bodyguard when the unwanted advances from rich heirs became too much to handle. Kian was her first, and with him, she wasn't alone anymore. For 3 years, 1,000 days and nights. He had never shown a flicker of interest. She thought he was just cold by nature. Until she saw him with Bella's picture. Until she saw him finish, then take a call. Mr. Mercer, how much longer are you going to play this bodyguard game? You're the uncrowned king of Sterling Heights. You can have any woman you want. If you fell for Isabella Vance, just take her. Why are you so sentimental? Hiding out as her sister's bodyguard just to see her. Kian's voice was cool. I've looked into it. Della's had a hard life. She's insecure. A direct approach would scare her. I want to take it slow, whatever you say. I just thought with Miss Vance throwing herself at you every day, you might have been tempted. The woman's a legend. The line of guys waiting for her could stretch to Paris. A faint chuckle. Then, words that plunged Scarlett into an icy abyss. Is that so? Not interested. She isn't worth a single strand of Bella's hair. Every word was a knife. In that single, brutal moment, her love for him died. Inside the room, Kian was still lost in his world. Scarlett's lips curved into a bitter smile. She pushed the door wide open. Chapter 2. When Kian's eyes snapped open, Scarlett saw nothing but a bottomless, black void. For a man of his stature, being caught in such a compromising position didn't even make him flinch. He calmly tucked the photo under his pillow and zipped his pants with slow, deliberate movements. In seconds, he was once again the aloof, untouchable guard, the man from moments before a mere illusion. Putting it away before you're finished, Scarlett's voice dripped with scorn. Frustrating, isn't it? Need some help? His expression didn't change. He simply leaned back, creating distance. Is there something you need, Miss Vance? He was always like this, aroused by a picture of Bella, but a passionless monk in her presence. Scarlett's nails bit into her palms. She pictured Bella's plain, washed-out face. She didn't have Scarlett's body or her looks, yet everyone fell for the innocent act. Fine. From this day forward, she was done with anyone who didn't want her. There's an auction tomorrow. You're coming with me, she said curtly. Turning to leave, Kian frowned. I believe I requested 2 days off. I heard Bella will be there, she said without looking back. A beat of silence, then, his low voice, understood. Miss Vance. Her heart twisted. As long as it involved Bella, he would break any rule. Don't worry, she thought. Soon, I'll deliver you to her myself. The next morning, Kian was already waiting by the car, his black suit perfectly tailored to his powerful frame. In the past, she would have used this as an opportunity to flirt, to fake a twisted ankle and fall into his arms. Today, she got into the car without a word, without even a glance in his direction. Kian seemed surprised, his gaze lingering on her for a second before he silently took his seat. The ride was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the engine. The auction was held at the city's most luxurious hotel. As soon as Scarlett entered, she saw Bella, dressed in a simple white dress, looking pure and harmless. As she chatted with a group of socialites, Kian's focus shifted instantly. Though he stood behind Scarlett, his attention was entirely on his beloved. Scarlett, Bella chirped, rushing over to link arms with her. What a coincidence! Scarlett pulled her arm away. Don't touch me. Bella's eyes immediately welled with tears. She looked plaintively at Kian. Kian, I just wanted to be friendly with my sister. Kian's brow furrowed, a flicker of disgust in his eyes as he looked at Scarlett. Bella seized her chance, tugging on his sleeve. Kian, I heard when I was sick last week, you were the one who drove through that thunderstorm at midnight to bring me my favorite cake. I'm so sorry. I've been recovering and haven't had a chance to thank you. Kian's stern expression softened instantly. It was nothing. Miss Bella, I was in the area. In the area. Scarlett scoffed internally. He had disappeared for 5 hours that night and came back soaked to the bone. I have to treat you to dinner to thank you, Bella said sweetly. Whenever you'd like. Miss Bella, we'll bring Scarlett with us. Bella looked at her. Oh, Scarlett, you look so tired. I was the one who was sick. Do I know you? Scarlett cut her off. Daughter of a homewrecker, mind your own business. Bella's face fell. Kian's jaw tightened. The auctioneer's announcement cut through the tension. Scarlett took her seat, done with the drama. She was marrying into the Hamilton family. But she couldn't count on her father for a dowry. She had to secure her own assets. The first item was a stunning pigeon blood ruby necklace. Starting bid, 1 million. She raised her paddle without hesitation. 2 million. Across the room, Bella raised hers, 3 million. She shot Scarlett a simpering smile. I love it too. Scarlett, You don't mind letting me have it, do you? After all, Daddy's allowance for you isn't quite as generous as mine. Scarlett smirked. That was an understatement. Growing up, Bella received $5 million a month. Scarlett got 500. If not for her mother's inheritance, she would have starved. But things were different now. She had $10 billion. For a million, Scarlett bid. Della faltered, then clenched her jaw. 4.5, 5 million, 5.5. After a few rounds, Bella's face was pale. Scarlett, where did you get all this money? Are you sure you can afford this? 10 million. Scarlett doubled the bid, her smile turning sharp. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. Della's face cycled through shades of white and red. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Miss Vance, your bid. Della frantically texted their father, her expression growing more desperate by the second. Julian had clearly refused. Of course he had. After giving Scarlett 10 billion, he had nothing left to fund his favorite daughter's ego. Just as the hammer was about to fall, a man in a sharp suit strode into the center of the room. My employer is placing an open bid, he announced. For the remainder of the auction, anything Miss Isabella Vance shows an interest in will be purchased for her, at any price. Chapter 3. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the hall. An open bid, for her. Who's the mystery benefactor? Looks like Bella Vance just hit the jackpot. Della herself was stunned, then delighted, then overcome with smug triumph. She turned to the man. Who is your employer? I'd like to thank him personally. My employer prefers to remain anonymous for now, miss. The assistant replied smoothly. He said he will reveal himself to you when the time is right. Della's gaze, dripping with victory, landed on Scarlett. Still bidding, sister, she purred, then added with mock innocence, oh, that I forgot. With an open bid against you, you'd probably go bankrupt. After all, who in this city has that kind of money? Scarlett's blood ran cold. She whipped her head around to look at Kian. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on Bella, and they were filled with a soft, possessive tenderness. The rest of the auction was a farce, a priceless vase, a set of antique furniture, even a Monet that started at 80 million all went to Bella. Scarlett finally shot to her feet. Is your employer buying every single item? She demanded of the assistant. The assistant glanced nervously at Kian, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I apologize, Miss Vance, the assistant said coldly. These are all gifts for Miss Bella. Her happiness is my employer's only concern tonight. Scarlett laughed, a brittle, broken sound. Her nails dug into her skin. She looked at Kian, whose gaze never once left the triumphant Bella. Well played, Kian Mercer, she thought. Bravo. After the auction, Bella was surrounded. The new queen of the social scene. Scarlett couldn't stand the sight of it and left. Take me to the velvet rope, she told the driver. She needed to numb the raw, gaping wound in her chest before the door could close. Della squeezed in beside her. Going clubbing, sister? I'm so bored. Take me with you. Scarlett was about to throw her out, but Kian calmly held the door open for Bella and instructed the driver. Go. The whole way there. Della chattered excitedly. Kian, why do you think this mystery man is being so good to me? I've never even met him. Kian's voice was impossibly gentle. Because he's in love with you. Della's eyes widened, her cheeks flushing. Kian, don't be ridiculous. A man's wallet follows his heart, he said, his gaze intense. Besides, any man would be lucky to fall in love with you. So, Bella asked coldly, are you in love with me? Too, Kian? Kian froze before he could answer. Scarlett snapped, if you two want to flirt, get the hell out of my car. Bella's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Scarlett, I'll be quiet. Scarlett turned to the window. In the reflection, she saw Kian looking at Bella with aching tenderness, and then at her own reflection with cold, hard disgust. She smiled bitterly. It seemed every man had a weakness for the damsel in distress. Chapter 4. At the club, Scarlett downed her third whiskey, to burn in her throat doing nothing to extinguish the fire in her heart. She lost herself on the dance floor, her red dress a blur of motion. From the corner of her eye, she saw Kian standing by their booth, guarding Bella like a loyal dog. Della leaned in close, her lips brushing against his ear. Scarlett saw a faint blush creep up the neck of the man who had always been nice to her. The sight made her laugh. As she turned, a group of predatory heirs cornered her. Dance with me. Scarlett, give me your number. Your pictures don't do you justice. They crowded her, their hands grabbing, one man's fingers sliding down to her waist. Kian, she finally shouted, her voice tight with rage. He finally seemed to notice, striding over with a frown. One dark look from him was enough to make the predators scatter. One might think you were her bodyguard, Scarlett sneered, wiping a stray drop of liquor from her collarbone. My apologies, I didn't see, he said, his voice flat. Didn't see? She stepped closer, her lips nearly brushing his jaw. Or didn't want to see? He flinched, his throat working as he took half a step back. You've had too much to drink, Miss Vance. Don't worry. Once I'm married off, you can have your precious Bella all to yours. A sudden roar from the stage drowned out her words. A massive iron cage was rolled out, containing two ferocious Tibetan mastiffs. Tonight's main event. The announcer yelled, "Place your baits." Scarlett hated the club's bloody spectacles. As she turned to leave, a sickening creak echoed through the room. The cage latch had broken. It happened in an instant. The larger dog burst free, lunging for the nearest crowd of people. In the ensuing chaos, Scarlett saw Kian react without a moment's hesitation. He spun around, grabbed Bella, and shielded her with his body as he shoved her toward the emergency exit. He left Scarlett standing directly in the path of the beast. She could see the saliva dripping from its fangs. A scream tore from someone's throat. Agony, sharp and blinding, ripped through her leg. She felt teeth sink into her calf, tearing through muscle and flesh. A chunk of her was ripped away, and she collapsed as blood sprayed across the floor. The world spun as the animal lunged for her again. Bang! A gunshot echoed, and the dog fell dead. The last thing Scarlett saw before darkness consumed her was Kian's back as he stood over Bella, gun in hand, protecting her. Chapter 5. When Scarlett woke to the smell of antiseptic, the first thing she saw was the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. The second thing she saw shattered her all over again. In the doorway, Bella was sobbing into Kian's chest. Kian, it's all my fault. You're her bodyguard, but you saved me. His hands stroked her back, his voice a gentle murmur. Don't blame yourself, Bella. He paused, his fingers brushing a tear from her cheek. Even if I had to do it 100 times over, I would always choose to protect you first. Why? Bella whispered, her eyes wide and tear-filled. Kian gazed at her, his dark eyes softening with an emotion Scarlett had never seen directed at anyone but Bella. Because I'm in. Crash! The water glass she'd knocked over shattered on the floor, silencing him. Scarlett, you're awake. Bella cried, rushing to her bedside. Are you okay? Does it hurt? This is all my fault. You being in my line of sight is what's making it hurt. Scarlett bit out, her voice raw. Bella flinched as if struck. She glanced at Kian, then fled the room in a storm of sobs. Kian started to follow her, then stopped. He turned to Scarlett, his expression unreadable. Miss Vance, it was an emergency. I didn't have time to think. She turned her head away, staring out the window. She didn't want to hear his excuses. For 3 days, he stood guard outside her door, and she never spoke a single word to him. The day she was discharged, she went straight to her father's study. From a locked drawer, she retrieved a long, black leather whip and old family heirloom for discipline. One lash could tear open skin. Send Kian Mercer to me, she told the butler. When Kian entered, she was solely polishing the whip. Kian, she said, her voice dangerously calm. You failed to protect me. I'm going to punish you. Do you have any objections? He stood frozen, his eyes wide with a flicker of disbelief. Scarlett saw it clearly. The great Kian Mercer, the heir to a fortune, had probably never imagined someone would dare to raise a hand to him. He could quit, he could walk out, but he was hesitating. For Bella to stay by her side, he would endure this humiliation. Scarlett's eyes burned. He finally lowered his head, his voice tight. No objections. The word was like a physical blow. She clenched the whip and raised her arm. No. A small figure flew into the room, shielding Kian with her body. Scarlett, if you're going to hit someone, hit me. Bella cried. It was my fault. Get out of my way. Scarlett hissed. I won't. Bella sobbed, clinging to Kian, watching them. A white-hot rage consumed Scarlett. She brought the whip down hard. It was aimed at him, but at the last second, Bella threw herself directly into its path. Crack! Bella screamed and crumpled to the floor. Kian caught her, his eyes flying to the red welt already rising on her back. When he looked up at Scarlett, his face was a mask of pure, murderous fury. For a second, she thought he was going to kill her. Her entire body went cold. Get out, she whispered, her voice trembling. He swept the unconscious Bella into his arms and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Scarlett stood alone, the whip slipping from her numb, shaking fingers. Chapter 6. 3 nights later, as Scarlett left a bridal boutique, someone grabbed her from behind. A chemical-soaked cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. She woke in darkness, blindfolded and tied to a chair. The first lash of the whip felt like fire, tearing across her back. "You crossed the wrong person," a gravelly voice said. The blows rained down, relentless and brutal. She bit her lip until it bled, refusing to scream. Who was doing this? Why? When it was finally over, she heard a phone dial. "Sir, the job is done," the man said respectfully. Then, a voice on the other end of the line, a familiar, chillingly calm voice replied, "Good. Send her back." It was Kian. He had done this to her. For one accidental lash on Bella, he had repaid her 100-fold. Pain and a soul-crushing cold washed over her, and she finally surrendered to the darkness. Days later, lying face down in a hospital bed, Scarlett could hear the nurses whispering outside. "That guy is so handsome, and so sweet to his girlfriend. I know, right? She has one tiny whip mark and he's acting like it's the end of the world." Meanwhile, the woman in 300 for looks like she was mauled, and no one's even come to visit. Scarlett ripped the fur from her arm and stumbled into the hallway. There, outside the VIP suite, was Kian. He was gently helping Bella sip from a glass of water, dabbing her lips with his thumb, his eyes full of adoration. Scarlett leaned against the wall, a silent, wet tear tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't understand how, after everything, her heart could still physically ache like this. "Don't cry, Scarlett," she told herself. "There's no one left to care." Today she returned to her villa. Kian was there, waiting. He had come back. They stared at each other in silence until her phone rang. It was her father. "It's Bella's birthday tomorrow," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She wants to make peace with you. You will be there." "I'm not going." "This is your last chance," he warned. "The Hamiltons have set the date, after you're married." She hung up and looked at Kian. "Should I go?" His face was a mask of stone. After a long moment, he said, "Yes, fine," she whispered, a broken smile touching her lips. "As you wish." At the party, Bella was the princess, showered with gifts. "Dad loves me the most," Julian beamed, standing beside her. It was a scene straight from Scarlett's stolen childhood. After the cake, Bella's friends cornered her. "So, Bella, what's your ideal man like?" one asked. Bella blushed, counting on her fingers. "First, he has to love me so much he tattooed my name over his heart. Second, he has to be brave enough to climb Moonlight Cliff to get me the legendary thorn rose. And third," before she could finish, the main doors burst open, an assistant strode in, followed by a procession of servants carrying lavish gifts: a rare pink diamond, a priceless painting, the deed to a private island. "A birthday gift from Miss Isabella," the assistant announced. "From Mr. Mercer." Chapter 7. The room erupted. "Mr. Mercer, the Mercer heir. He's sending gifts like this. It's official. Bella Vance is going to marry into the Mercer family." Sympathetic glances were thrown Scarlett's way. She was prettier, the legitimate daughter, but in that moment, everyone saw her as the loser. She walked out to the terrace for air. "What's wrong, sister?" Bella followed her, her sweet mask finally gone. "Did you hear? You're marrying the ghost," she purred, her voice dripping with venom. "It's just like our mothers, yours lost. And now, you've lost to me." Scarlett spun around. "What did you say?" "I said," Bella hissed, leaning in close, "your mother deserved to die in childbirth." She slap. But it wasn't Scarlett who hit her. Bella slapped her own face, hard. Then, just as Kian rushed onto the terrace, she stumbled backwards into his arms, bursting into tears. "It's not Scarlett's fault," she sobbed. "I made her angry." Her father and the other guests crowded the doorway, their accusing glares pinning Scarlett to the wall. "Have you no shame?" Julian roared. Scarlett looked at the perfectly staged drama and started to laugh. She strode forward, and in front of everyone, delivered a real, stinging slap across Bella's face. "There," she said, smashing a champagne flute on the ground. "Now that one was from me." As she walked away, she saw the look in Kian's eyes as he held the weeping Bella. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. In the garden, an iron grip seized her wrist. It was Kian. "Miss Vance," he growled, his voice thick with suppressed rage. "What?" she mocked. "Going to have me whipped again for this one?" His eyes widened slightly. He couldn't know she knew. "You have everything," he bit out, Why do you have to torment her? I have everything. Scarlett's laugh was a raw, broken sound. She took everything. She killed my mother. She stole my father, my home, my future, everything. It was the most she had ever said to him. He stared at her, at the inch tear shimmering in her defiant eyes. I was told, he said, his voice hard, that Bella was the one who had a difficult life. Scarlett ripped her arm from his grasp. Believe whatever you want. As she got in her car, he spoke again. I need to request a few days off. Whatever, she said. Slamming the door, a mile down the road, she told the driver, turn back. She saw him get into a Rolls-Royce and followed it to a high-end tattoo parlor. Through the window, she watched as Kian took off his shirt. He pointed to the spot directly over his heart and mouthed a name to the artist. Della. Chapter 8. The buzzing of the needle was a phantom sound in Scarlett's ears. Each vibration a new stab to her own heart. 2 hours later, Kian emerged, his hand pressed to his bleeding chest, and got back in the car. To Moonlight Cliff, he told his driver. Scarlett remembered Bella's words, tattoo my name over his heart. Get me the thorn rose from Moonlight Cliff. She started to laugh, a hollow, empty sound that turned into a silent sob. Let's go, she told her driver. Stop following him. That night, Bella posted a photo to her social media. A single, beautiful rose covered in thorns, held in a man's hand. The caption read, he crossed mountains for me. At 3 a.m., Kian returned to the villa. He was covered in scrapes and blood, his right arm clearly broken, but there was a faint, triumphant smile on his lips. The next morning, their paths crossed in the hallway. Miss Vance, he said, his voice hoarse, I was in a small car accident. I'll need a few more days to recover. A car accident, she thought. Or did you fall off a cliff? But she just nodded and walked past him. That night, she met her friends for a farewell party. To the future Mrs. Hamilton, her best friend, Lena, toasted, already drunk. A rich, handsome husband who can't talk back or cheat on you. You're living the dream. Scarlett smiled, sipping her champagne. Once I'm married, I'll have to settle down, be a proper wife. Everyone fell silent, then rushed to reassure her. He'll definitely wake up. Who could stay asleep with a wife as beautiful as you? At the end of the night, Lena hugged her tightly, her voice thick with emotion. Your father is a bastard. You want us to take care of Bella for you? No, Scarlett said, her voice soft. Once I'm gone, none of it will matter anymore. As she was leaving, she passed an open door and heard Bella's voice. So he really climbed that cliff. He must be crazy about you, a friend was saying. I even saw the tattoo over his heart. Are you two going to get serious? Bella laughed, a tinkling, cruel sound. He's just a bodyguard. Am I supposed to be impressed? I have the Mercer heir interested in me now. Still, she added, tracing the petals of the thorn rose, Kian is gorgeous. He'll make a fun little plaything on the side. Chapter 9. Scarlett stood in the shadows, a bitter smile on her face. This, Kian, is the woman you would die for. She turned and walked away. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. Deposit $10 billion. Her father called. The money is there. The Hamiltons are expecting you today. As for Kian, I'll handle him. Scarlett cut him off. From this day on, he's Bella's problem. I don't want him anymore. She hung up and blocked his number forever. The moving vans were already outside. Kian emerged from his room, frowning at the boxes. Miss Vance, what's all this? I'm moving, she said without looking at him. I'll help, no need. You have another task. What is it? Go to the bakery downtown, buy a box of their chestnut pastries and deliver them to Bella at the estate. He froze, a flicker of something she couldn't decipher crossing his face. But the desire to see Bella won out. Miss Vance, please send me your new address. I'll pack my things and join you this evening. It was part of their contract. 24/7's protection. She didn't answer. He waited, then sighed. Assuming she would text it to him later, he turned and left. Just as he reached the gate, he thought he heard her say something. What was that? He called back. Scarlett stood in the morning light, her face serene. Nothing, go on. She watched until his car disappeared down the street. Then she got into her own car. To the airport, she said. As the city sped by, she took the SIM card from her phone. With a sharp snap, she broke it in two and tossed the pieces out the window, watching them disappear into the wind. Chapter 10. Kian stood before the Vance estate, the warm bag of pastries in his hand. His heart was hammering in his chest, A strange, frantic rhythm that felt like dread. He pushed the feeling down, telling himself it was just excitement. Inside, he heard Bella's angry voice. 10 billion, Dad. Are you insane? It was her condition for marrying Arthur Hamilton. Julian's voice was strained. Bella, be reasonable. It was either her or you. She goes to Heavenwood today. Now, it's over. Of course I'm not going to marry a vegetable. Bella snapped, not when the Mercer heir is interested in me. She caught sight of Kian and her expression instantly changed. Kian, you're here. He offered her the pastries, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. Eat them while they're warm. She took them, her fingers brushing his. You're so sweet. He should have been happy. This was what he wanted, but the feeling of wrongness was suffocating him. I should go, he said abruptly. You don't have to, Bella said, grabbing his arm. Scarlett didn't tell you. She gave you to me. His mind went blank. Gave him. She took the money and left for Heavenwood this morning to marry that comatose Hamilton guy. Bella explained cheerfully. You're my bodyguard now. The world tilted. Married. To Arthur Hamilton. He remembered her saying she was moving. He thought of her face when she first hired him. A fiery, vibrant girl in a red dress who pointed at him and said, that one. He's handsome. He remembered her clumsy, almost innocent attempts at seduction. He remembered her screaming at him for getting hurt, her hands covered in his blood as she tried to save him. A pain, sharp and visceral, lanced through his chest, stealing his breath. Kian, Bella's voice pulled him back. Aren't you happy you get to protect me now? He heard himself say, it's my honor, Miss Bella. But all he could see was Scarlett's last look, cool, distant, as if he were a complete stranger. As he followed Bella out the door, he tried to convince himself this was for the best. Scarlett was gone. Now, no one could hurt his Bella ever again. Chapter 11. Kian's devotion to Bella became the talk of the town. He bought her anything she wanted, protected her from any perceived slight, and catered to her every whim. The Mercer heir was utterly bewitched. One evening, returning from a drive in the countryside, a truck lost control, barreling straight towards them. Without a thought, Kian wrenched the wheel, spinning the car so his side would take the impact. He threw himself over Bella, shielding her with his body. The world exploded in a shower of glass and screeching metal. A shard of steel pierced his back, but his arms never loose and their protective hold on Bella. The last thing he heard before passing out was her terrified screams. He woke up in the hospital. You idiot. Bella sobbed, clinging to him. You almost died. The pressure on his wound was excruciating, but he gently stroked her hair. It's okay. I'm okay. The doctor said the metal was an inch from your heart. She cried. You're so good to me, Kian. You always have been. The cake in the rain, winning that necklace for me, climbing that dangerous cliff for a flower. She looked at him, her eyes shining with hope. Why? Why do you do all this for me? He opened his mouth to say the words he'd been holding back for years. Because I love you, but they wouldn't come out. His heart felt like it was being crushed tin of ice. All he could think about was another hospital room, another injury, and Scarlett's furious, terrified face screaming, your life is important, too. The memory was so vivid, so painful, that he flinched. In 3 days, he said, changing the subject, meet me. I have something important to tell you. Just then, Bella's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and a look of panic crossed her face. Kian, I have to go. I'm so sorry. She grabbed her purse and fled. The moment she was gone, Kian's smile vanished. He picked up his own phone and called his best friend. Heard you tried to become a real-life hero, his friend teased. I need you to plan something for me, Kian said, his voice flat. A proposal. What? You're finally going to do it. You're going to ask Bella to marry you. No, Kian said, and the word hung in the sterile air of the hospital room, heavy with a truth that was only just beginning to dawn on him. He thought of Scarlett's laugh, her anger, her pain, her final, empty gaze. He thought of the gaping hole she'd left in his life, a void he had desperately, foolishly tried to fill with Bella. Find out where Scarlett is, he said, his voice cracking with an emotion he couldn't name. Find her. Now.